Hello everybody and welcome back to the Professional Diploma in Photography. Welcome to lesson number 5. I hope you're all very excited about this lesson. We're going to be having lots of fun making composites within Photoshop, and you should definitely check this out. Eric Johansson, he creates these incredible photo composites like this one here, but even better, he actually gives you some insight into how these images are created and just how much work goes into them. So let's actually have a very quick look at his website. So it's www.erikjo.com, and as you can see here, he creates this very surreal photography. So if we just click enter here, we can see loads and loads of examples of the kind of composites that Eric creates, and these are just absolutely stunning. Top of the line composites, and they're just incredible. This is way beyond my skill level for sure. But what's great, if you check out his behind the scenes, he'll actually give you insight into how these types of images are created. You can just see how much work goes into them. I mean, even here, this drifting away, you can just see the amount of layers that are there, even in just the thumbnail. So very, very inspirational work. Definitely be sure to check that out after the lesson. So you're here with myself, William Eames, your course educator. I hope you're all in great form today and are, as I said, are really excited about this lesson. We've got lots and lots to cover. So remember, if you have any questions at all throughout this lesson, please do remember to interact and to ask Morpheus. And remember to rate those responses as well so we can continually improve them for you. Or if you want to share any work with us, or if you've got anything that left outstanding at the end of the lesson, please do remember to reach out to us at support@shawacademy.com. Now, we're going to dive straight into this lesson because we have an awful lot to get through. And basically, everything that we've been looking up to this stage is going to come together in this lesson. So we're going to be using all of the things that we have learned. We're going to have a look at how to create some image adjustments. We're going to have a look at adding some adjustment layers. We're going to have a look at using our masking skills. We're going to have a look at using our selection skills. And we're also going to be using plenty of layers to create image composites. First of all, what is an image composite? Well, basically, I mean, to really simplify it, it's an image which is one image stacked upon another. And image composites are used so frequently within things like advertising, fashion magazines, to create these kind of unreal images, I suppose, these kind of scenarios and scenes that would be next to impossible to catch in real life. Now, that's not to say that, you can't believe your eyes. Sometimes photographers will make that extra effort and will use practical effects and practical props to create these kind of fantastic images. But in the case like Eric Johansson at the start of the lesson, these would all be created using multiple images blended together to create a final product. And like here's a very, very simple image composite, something that we're going to be working on and maybe take it a step further a little bit later on in the lesson. We also have what's known as creative masking, which is very straightforward, which is using a selection and a mask together to create something like this, which is exactly what we're going to do now in just a moment, where you can kind of take two or more images together and just using layers and masking just create these types of conceptual images. Very, very easy and simple to do. Then we also have what are known as layered composites, and this is something we've kind of seen before already, where we're using multiple layers together to create one final image. And as you can see here in this instance, there's 4 layers that have been used. We have our background image, which is the tornado, the sky in this case. We also have our road. We have a variation on the road. This is basically a lighter opacity, and what this actually is color matching. So we're, as you can see here, in the final image, it's a duller grey. It actually resembles the light much closer to the sky. And then finally we have a vignette layer on that as well. So we're going to have a look at how to do that now throughout the lesson too, and much more. So let's get right into it, and let's get into using Photoshop and make some simple composites to begin with. So I've already got a lot of images open here already. Now we may not use every single one of them throughout this lesson, but I just wanted a few options available to me to play around with. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of organizing here. We'll just put these two images here together, our mug of coffee and our RC. So we'll work on these two images here first of all. And what we want to do is we want to place this water, these kind of waves into this teacup and create, I suppose, the kind of storm in a teacup. So very simply, first of all, all we have to do is click and drag our image over onto our coffee cup. Okay, and Control+T just to get it to the size. Now, I'm using a newer version of Photoshop. So for me, when I click and drag the edges here, I don't need to press anything else. It just keeps the shape, the format for me as I click and drag. In older versions of Photoshop, and it's something that I've been kind of doing throughout this course because I'm still trying to get used to it, is that you actually had to hold Shift and click to keep that proportion. You hold Shift and click. Now when you do it in Photoshop, it actually gives you more of a kind of a free form to play with, but they've changed it in newer versions of Photoshop where you just have to click and drag. But if you are using an older version of it, remember to press Shift and click on edges to keep that format. Okay, I don't know why they made that change. It's awfully confusing for somebody like me, and I'm sure for other people who've been using Photoshop for years, but there we have it. But what we place our image somewhat over where we want the final image to be. And when you're doing this, I strongly recommend that you reduce the opacity of the layer so that you can get a good idea of whereabouts it's going to be placed. Okay, so we just reduce the opacity somewhere around 50%, just enough so that you can actually see what's happening below the image. And then you can increase or decrease the size of the image to suit. Okay, I'm going to increase it now in this instance and try to have as much of the kind of waves there in as possible. So I think that's absolutely fine. Bring it down there a little bit. We can bring up the opacity there again, and for now we can just hide that layer by switching off the eye. Okay, so we're just hiding it there for the moment, and we're working on our background layer. Now, it is good practice as well. It's not 100% necessary, but it's good practice too when you're beginning off to duplicate your background layer as well. So all you need to do is drag it down to the new layer option and it will create a background copy. This just means that you always have your original background there to fall back on just in case anything goes wrong, or if you just wanted to undo something and get rid of your layers altogether, you've always got your background layer there to work from scratch. It's just good practice. It's not 100% necessary to do. But working on our background copy, the next thing we want to do then is we want to select the coffee here in the cup itself. Now we've got a couple of ways that we can do this, as we know from using our selection tools in the previous lesson. I don't think the lasso tool is going to be very useful here, or indeed any of the magnetic lasso tools in that. We could use our elliptical marquee tool here. And if you actually start from the center and if you hold the Alt key, so the Alt key there, you can control and drag out from the center instead. So we go right into the center and we hold the Alt key and the Shift key actually in this case as well to keep that perspective. You can see that it works from the center out, and it makes it that little bit easier to select the this circular coffee. But again, I think would mean that we need to do a little bit of refining of the edge, which we won't do right now. So instead what we'll do is we'll just deselect that altogether. And we're going to come up and we're going to select our quick selection tool instead. just increase the size of that a little bit. I'm actually going to switch on the auto enhance there as well, just to make sure that it does a little bit of a more accurate job in selecting the edges. As we kind of saw in the previous lesson, I certainly had a bit of an issue with refining the edges and refining my selections. That's okay, because I'm going to show you now in this lesson how you can improve upon selecting the edges. But for now, that's a fairly solid selection. Now, I mean, if you've ever watched anyone else do these kind of selections on YouTube, you'll always find that they actually speed up that process a little bit, because it can take a long time to get it 100% accurate. But obviously, because I'm doing this in real time, you know, I do include those mistakes in that, just to show you that you do need to spend that time on it to get 100% right. Now, so with that selected, what we can do here now as well is we can come back and we switch on our layer, our top layer here, our layer 1. And what you can see is that we actually still have our marching ants. Okay, so we still have the selection underneath this layer. Okay, and this is where something really magical happens. When we have this layer selected, if I come down to the bottom of my layer panel here, I have this option called Add Layer Mask, and when I click Add Layer Mask, wow, it has created a brand new layer mask based on that selection. Okay, so now remember, everything else is actually still there. It's just hidden because it's hidden behind the black. Remember, black reveals and white conceals. So our layer mask is hiding all of those other pixels, and now we have close to the shape of the actual coffee in the coffee cup. Still need to do a little bit of work here on it. That's okay. That was always to be expected. So if I come back up, and I can select my move tool to kind of move the image around a little bit more. I can also press Control plus T or Command plus T to bring up my transform tool here again and just expand that out a little bit more towards the edges. Okay, now it's not perfect. That's absolutely fine. So we just hit enter on that, and now that's looking a little bit better. So the next step that we want to do here as well is we want to kind of blend it into the edges. We want to soften those edges a little bit more. And I want to bring, if I just switch that layer off here again, there's this lovely shine off the coffee here and these bubbles here at the edges as well. I want to bring those through so that we can see those in the waves here as well. Okay, so how I can do that is when I have my layer and selected the layer mask on it, okay, we have that selected. Above this, I have what are known as blend modes. Okay, so I'll just click this again. Where it says normal here, I have what are called blend modes. And if I click this down, I have a huge amount of options available to me. And each of these will affect the layer in a number of different ways. Now, some are self-explanatory, like darken. We'll just darken your layer. Some are a little bit more complicated. There's quite a lot of them here to go through. But the one that we want to use is if we use screen. So basically what screen will do, it'll allow the brighter parts of the underneath layer to come through while still hiding the darker parts. So when I do that, actually, you can actually see it there on the screen. It's bringing the lighter part to shine and the bubbles will come through, but it won't bring that darkness of the coffee. There is an opposite version as well, which I think is darken. I forget which one it is, but one of these there is a kind of an, it would logically make sense. It's probably multiply is what it is. So you'll find that, you know, depending on the image that you're using, you're going to want to play around with these different blend modes. Overlay is one that's used very, very frequently as well. We will be using overlay a little bit later on, but for this instance, screen is definitely the way to go. So I can select screen. Now it's getting there. We can see the bubbles coming through there a little bit. I'm going to reduce the opacity down here a little bit as well. Okay, not too much because we don't want it to get too dark. Okay, but I am going to bring it down to roughly to about 85%. Okay, so we can bring that shine through a little bit more. And, you know, it's looking much better. But we still have these kind of jagged edges from where the selection was made. Okay, so what we're going to do here then is we're going to come to our brush option. Okay, so we want to just select, we don't want to select our history brush, sorry, we want to select our standard brush tool, which is B, and we want to click on our layer, make sure that's active. When we're using the brush, if we're using, black will hide our edges and white will reveal them. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use black and we're going to just paint out some of the edges here. Okay, so we're going to increase the opacity here a little bit. We'll bring it up to about 75% to begin with. I'll also make that brush a little bit smaller so we can get very close in the edges. And we're just painting out the edges. Okay, so just very much towards the edge. Again, you'd really want to get a little bit closer to this to get it 100%. But we don't really have a huge amount of time to do that at the moment. Okay. So that's definitely looking a lot better already just by working a little bit on the edges there. And, we've got a very, very simple composite there created already. That's really cool. I really, really like that, the result of that. And you can actually see it there, where we've just drawn in using that layer and the layer mask. Okay, so we'll park that image there now for the moment and we'll move on to something a little bit more complicated. But you can see how easy it is when you're creating these basic composites. Remember though to go back over this through the recordings and to take it step by step, because I did run through quite a lot there in a very short period of time. But let's now move on to something else a little bit more complicated, a little bit more fun. We're going to take this image here of a forest and we're going to add a couple of effects to it via using some overlays. I want to add this type of flare effect, so I'm going to just click and drag that over onto my onto the forest here. Sorry, lost my words. We'll just reduce the size of that down again to some kind of somewhere in within the range. Okay, that's fine for now. I'm also going to create a gradient layer as well. So if I come to the bottom here again, we've got create new fill or adjustment layer. We could go with a solid color. We could go with a gradient, or you can actually even add a pattern, and of course you can add all your various adjustment layers. But we're going to add a gradient here in this instance, okay? And I'm going to choose one that, let's see, give us kind of a almost a sunset type of effect. Now you can also change this as well. You can go linear, you can go radial, which is kind of a circular one. You can come in at a particular angle, as you can see, quite a hard one there. You can go reflected, and you can have a diamond. So there's loads of different options there as well. We're just going to go a linear for now. You can also create your own gradient here as well if you want to go color to transparent. We'll actually do that. So if I click OK on that, we've got a brand new one here, but I actually wanted to change the color of it. If I click on my layer, it opens up a brand new layer option for me, and I can click the swatches here to change the color. So I'm going to select an orange type of color, okay? And yeah, there you go. You can be very, very clear, very obvious there. Now, and you can adjust that a little bit more if you want to move that gradient to whatever way you prefer. Okay, I'm also just going to reverse it here as well, so it's actually coming from the top down to the bottom. All right. Okay, so if I click OK on that, we now have our 3 different layers. Now, so if I click on just my second layer here and I bring this up, I want to blend it in to the photograph. So I can simply click on my blend modes, and again I can go down through the various options available to me, and you can see here none of these are very suitable. I think screen again might be my best option, or overlay is actually also very, very good here too. We'll try overlay. I'm going to reduce the opacity of it down here as well, and as you can see there, we've got kind of an instant effect there already with our flare, our lens kind of flare, our lens glare being added to the image. Now the overlay as well has also kind of created this kind of natural dark kind of feeling to the photograph, which actually really benefits, really suits this photograph too. but we can also paint that out as well. So if you wanted to add a little bit more to this, we can add a layer mask. Okay, so then we have our mask here as well, and we can paint out then any adjustment that we don't want. So if I come up to my brush here again, we'll just increase the size of it, and you know, if you wanted to just paint out the edges there a little bit, if you felt they were too dark, it is possible to bring back some of that detail there as well. Okay, let's just see how that's looking. Okay, yeah, I'm happy enough with how that's looking there at the edges. I might actually just bring back a little bit of that darkness there at the edge there again, because I prefer it on that side, but definitely maybe keep some of that detail coming out there. Okay, then the next step is we want to add a little bit of color to this by adding our gradient here. Now, as you can see, it's just simply far too strong here. Okay, so I click on my gradient and I can reduce it down here as well. And you can see it adds this nice haze, this nice kind of effect to it, a nice warmth to the image here too. Okay, just where the light would be coming in here, just where that lens flare is there as well. And again, you know, if you felt that it was too much, it was too strong, you can also paint out some of that there as well. So we're going to reduce the opacity down of our brush, just paint out some of that there to try and make it look a little bit more natural. Okay, and there we go. I mean, very, very quick, very, very simple, but that's our original photograph. We've added a bit of a lens flare into it, and we've also added a nice bit of haziness to the image as well. Now, of course, you can continue to build upon this if you like. You could add another gradient if you wanted to you know, to balance out that color a little bit. If you wanted to bring in a secondary color here to the bottom, you could also add your adjustments and so on to just keep building and building and building upon this image as much as you liked. But I think that's looking much better already, and I don't really think that there's anything else that I need to do with this image for now. So the next thing then we're going to work on is we're going to go to our image of a statue, and we want to place our statue into this landscape. Okay, so quite a bit of work involved in this one, and just before I do that, actually I might just close down some of these images that we're not going to use. Actually, I'll undo that. We'll get rid of that. We don't need this one anymore, so we just close that out there as well. Don't need that. Just want to tidy things up a little bit so I don't get too confused. Okay, now, great, makes things a little bit tidier. So what we want to do here first of all is we want to remove the background here and place the statue into this landscape. So as we've seen before, sometimes it makes more sense to actually select the outside of the image rather than the inside of the object that you want to work on. So we select one of our tools here, our selection tools. We'll go with our magic wand in this instance. Okay, so we'll click the magic wand, and straight away it's done a fairly good job of selecting everything that I need here. But you can see there's a little bit of issues here just at the edges. Okay. So you need to get in closer here a little bit. So we just press Z to select our zoom tool. We're going to change the quick selection tool here instead. And I'll need to minus my selection. So I press the Alt key because remember I'm working on the inside of it. You could also inverse your selection and you can add to the selection instead. But we're going to take away from our selection technically because I am working on the inside of this. So I just want to go around the edges as best as possible. It doesn't need to be 100% because I'm going to show you how you can refine your selection a little bit more. Okay, I'm happier with how that's looking. That all looks okay to me. So I press Z to zoom out. You can also just hit fit screen here as well, just to quickly fit it into the screen here again. Now, going back up to your selection tool, you can then hit select and mask. Now, before we do that, remember we need to inverse our selection. Then we can hit select and mask, and there we go. We have our selection made. But it's not, again, it's not perfect around the edges, so we need to do a little bit of refining to this. Okay, so we can do that a number of ways. Now remember, we can change our view mode, so we can change to whatever way you prefer, whatever way you feel is easiest for you to see the edges of the image. Okay, but I'm going to go with on black myself. I'm also going to click this option off here called show edge. Show edge. Now, when I have show edge selected, I have my opacity at 100%, and if I start to reduce it, you can actually begin to see the image appear underneath. Okay, but I'm also going to do here though as well, if I change the radius, now you can actually see the edge. Now I can adjust it very, very high there, and you can see how much it goes out and pushes out the edge. Okay, so this is really, really useful. This will allow me to really refine that edge and get in close, much, much closer, so that my selection looks more natural. Now, I recommend when you do that as well, that you actually have all of these other settings set to 0. So just concentrate on refining your edge, getting in as tight as possible. And I think, let's see how we go with 2 pixels. Now, again, you can just zoom in, press the Z key and zoom in here just to be sure. Okay, and I quite like that. I think that's okay. You could go a bit smaller again, go down to 1 pixel, and that's very, very tight at the edge. Okay, so let's see. So I can then just switch off my show edge here, and that looks much, much better. Now, it's still not perfect, so we can begin then to add a little bit of smoothness to that edge. You could also feather it a little bit as well. We're not going to do that in this instance. Maybe add a little bit of contrast to the edge and shift the edge out a little bit more. But that's much, much better than any previous selection that we have made. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I can click OK on that. Well, first of all, we can also remove the background. We can go decontaminate colors, and if you click decontaminate colors, it'll actually just by default select new layer with layer mask, and that's exactly what I want to do in this instance. So I click OK on that. Great. Now again, we could probably refine that edge a little bit more, but for right now, that is okay with me. So let's just click on that and let's bring it over to our image here and just drag and drop. Okay. So now we've got that drag and drop. We can press Control T, we can reduce the size down. But one of the big issues here is the fact that, well, if we have a look at this image, it doesn't really naturally fit into the lighting and the tone and the colors of everything else that's within this landscape. So we're going to need to do a little bit of work on that to make it look more natural. So I can make it look more natural by introducing some adjustments, some adjustment layers, which you had a look at all the way back in lesson number 2. Now, let's just say for argument's sake, because I'm trying to match the color, I choose my hue and saturation, and I just simply click it off, and it's created a brand new adjustment layer for me. And let's just go ahead and make a change. But now we see there's quite a significant issue here. When I change the hue and saturation, it's changing the entire image. Okay, so my layer is above two of my layers there, and because of that, it is changing the entire image. So I'm going to have to do something a little bit different with this. I only wanted to adjust my statue layer. So what I can do here is if I actually just float somewhere in between the 2 layers here, so just below my hue and saturation layer and above the layer I want to edit, and I right click or command click, I have this option here called create clipping mask. Now you can also press alt click or command click as well to bring this up, just to do it as a shortcut. But if I click create clipping mask, and I've done it on the wrong layer, so we'll do it there again. We highlight our layer, we right click just underneath it and create clipping mask. You can see it's kind of shifted everything over a little bit there to the right. I'll just drag that out so we can see it a bit more. And you can see we've got this little arrow here as well, and that indicates that it's only going to change, it's only going to apply the adjustment to the layer directly below it. So now if I make an adjustment to my hue and saturation, now you can see here it is only changing the color of the statue. So we're going to go somewhere within the yellow here, yellow orangey kind of look there. We'll reduce this saturation down a little bit because it is still a statue, it is still made of stone, And you can increase the lightness or the darkness there as well to try and match it even more with the kind of contrast there within the scene. Now you can add as many of these layers as you like. Remember, you will need to just create clipping masks for each of them. You can also release the clipping mask there as well if you want to undo that. You could reduce the opacity down on that maybe a little bit there as well, just to try and blend it in more. But that's how we can apply an adjustment to just one layer and not the overall image. Now it looks a lot better. I'm going to just do one final step here, and I'm going to just drag down my background layer and create a copy. So just go drag it down to my new layer. It's created a background copy. I'm going to pop it over this all of the layers here, and then I'm going to come over and I'm going to create a mask. So if I come down to the bottom here again, we just create a quick mask there, and I'm going to start to paint out the location of where the statue is. So we just reduce the opacity down here again so we can see where the statue is. Okay, we'll come over, we'll select our brush. We've got black selected, that's fine. I just want to paint it out here. And what I want to do here is I'm just trying to blend it into the ground. So we want to make the look like the statue's coming out of the ground. So I can do that by I'll increase the opacity there. And now you can see it looks like it's planted firmly within the ground. Okay, so I did that by simply duplicating my background layer and putting it on top of the statue layer, and then erasing it so that we can reveal the statue. So now it looks very much like it's planted firmly in the ground. A final step here then I'm going to create is another adjustment, and to just try and make everything again look like it's all within the same scene. I'm going to create this new photo filter adjustment, which adds a warming filter or different color filters depending on whichever one you like. Like you could go deep emerald if you wanted. We'll go with a warming filter here, and again it just helps to kind of color match the entire scene. Increase it if you want to make it very, very dense, very orange, but I'm going to reduce it down. And we've actually got a lot here, a lot of kind of orange here already. So I'm also going to come back to my brush. I'm going to reduce the opacity of it down to about 50. I'm going to make the brush larger, and I'm just going to paint out some of that filter there as well. Okay, so just about halfway there in it, and there we go. Now we've got an image that looks like it's, it needs a little bit more work, but it looks a little bit more like this statue was actually located here on top of this hill, overlooking this landscape in the single scene. So if I just switch off the adjustments, you can see that's how it looked originally. Doesn't look too natural, but it's looking a little bit better when we apply those changes. Now, just quickly jumping back into the slideshow, I just wanted to show you here when we're working with animals or with objects or anything like that that has a lot of texture or a lot of fur or very complicated edges, like you can see here. We can use the select and mask to effectively cut out complex shapes and objects like this. Like you can even see here that we have all our whiskers and everything here on this little kitty cat. So I just want to show you very, very quickly how to do that before we move on to our final image composite. So what we're going to do here, again, we're just going to do a very quick selection. Again, you can either do this on the inside or the outside, whatever you feel is the easiest. We'll go on the outside, actually. I think that's going to be a bit easier. Just quickly draw around our kitty cat as accurately as possible. But as you can see here, it'd be very, very tricky, very difficult to select the whiskers there, okay? Because they're just so fine. So what we're going to do here, we just right click, we want to select an inverse. Okay, we'll just undo that. Sorry, I'll just cancel that again. I'll do that again. So you go select an inverse. So selected, select and mask there. Select inverse, and now we want to select and mask. There we go. There's our kitty cat, and we want to just we can switch on our show edges here again if we want to just bring out that edge a little bit more. Okay, all right. So that's. I'm just going to reduce the opacity down a little bit so we can still see the cat, but we can also see the edge there as well. Now, we can use our tools here to kind of refine the edges. As we've seen, we can feather out the edges here as well. That'll help to bring back some of that fur. But to get even more accurate, we have a range of tools available to us over here on the left hand side. Okay, so we've got quick selection tool if we want to add to our selection. Refine edge brush tool, which is the one we're going to use. We also have our standard brush tool, our lasso tool again if we want to add to our selection, and our hand tool just to move around the image and zoom in. So using the refine edge tool, we click our brush. We can add or we can subtract. We can change the size of it and everything like that as well. We'll just reduce the size of it down. And all we have to do then is just to move around the edges here. Okay, so we're just moving around the edges, and what I'm going to do here is actually just turn off the show edge option, and here you can see it happening a little bit better. Okay, so while we're moving around the edges, we're bringing back things like our whiskers here. We're bringing back the fur here a little bit more, as you can see. Okay, so you can actually kind of see it appear there, and you just keep going around the edges as best as possible to bring back that fur. Okay, so let's just increase the opacity there again to see how we're going. There you go. You can see that's much better already. That we, we're bringing those whiskers back. We can just go over there again just to bring them back even more. So that's how you can bring back textures like that. You can bring up the feathering and so on, just to refine it there even more so, and apply all your other adjustments. So we just quickly hit create new mask there. There we go. That's looking really well. We've got our edges, our nice kind of soft edges there. There's a little bit of opacity there happening around the edges there as well. So say I was just to quickly just click and drag, and let's just pop our kitty cat here in the night sky. But I just want to show you basically the how well that edge looks. Okay, it looks really well. So that's a terrific tool to use when cutting out more complex shapes with lots of texture, lots of hair, lots of fur, or anything like that around the edges. Okay, really cool, really useful. Now, so for the final part of this lesson, we're going to do something a little bit more complicated. We want to take this night sky here, and we want to put it behind the Louvre here. Now, that should seem quite straightforward now at this stage, but there's quite a bit of work involved here, because one of the biggest challenges we're going to have here is the fact that we have this reflection here as well that we're going to have to match to. So let's take our night sky. We'll just click and drag it over. Now, it's a very large image, so we just need to go to find the edges. We'll just Control+T, and we just reduce the size down. Now remember, if you're using an older version of Photoshop, that you will have to shift click to maintain those proportions. Okay, so we just get it somewhere within our range. Just do this very fast. There we go. That will suffice for now. Okay, so we've just placed that above our image of the Louvre. We'll switch that off for now, and then we just wanted to take out the sky. So we come to our selection tools here. We'll go with a magic wand tool here. Very quick selection. Okay, just try to get a bit tighter in there around the edges. Perfect. Okay, and just again there. Okay, so remember, we need to inverse. So we right click, we go to inverse selection, select inverse, there we go, and we go select and mask, and there we go. That's an alright looking selection. Now again, you can go to show edge, bring that radius up a little bit, and we just shift that out a little bit more. 1 pixel seems to work very well. Smooth it out, add a little bit of contrast, and indeed you can also refine the edge a little bit more here as well if you liked. I don't think we really need to do that in this instance. Okay, so we're happy with that. We go to decontaminate colors, new layer with mask, and we click OK. Okay, it is a little bit soft there, just around the edges, but in the interests of time, we'll just leave it like that for the moment. Now if we switch back on our layer, just drag it down behind that layer, and there we go. Very quick, simple composite, but there's still quite a bit of work involved here. We need to match those colors a little bit more, but we also need to introduce the reflection here as well. And we can match those colors a little bit by reducing the opacity of this layer. Okay, so because I still have my background layer, which I'll just switch back on, if I actually reduce the opacity of it down a little bit, you can see that we still have our night sky here in the background. It's just but we're bringing in a little bit of that purple, that light pollution really, from the original image. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. It's just to reduce the opacity down. It works very well in this particular instance. Okay, we can also add our adjustments as well. So in this case, we will bring in a color balance one. Okay, now we can go and apply color balance to the entire image. I just want to make it a little bit cooler. Okay, that's looking a little bit more natural. We could also, if we wanted to, just right click on that and create a clipping mask, so that we're only adjusting the foregrounds here and not the backgrounds. So we can just match it a little bit more. Okay, I'm happy with that. That looks pretty good for now. We'll just reduce the opacity there a little bit as well. I always reduce the opacity there too, just to try and blend things a little bit more. So that's an alright looking composite, but our challenge here now is going to be to add the starry sky to this part below. Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to come back to our starry layer. We need to create a secondary copy of this. We're just going to switch off all of these options here for now. There's our starry layer. We just increase the opacity on that. We need to flip it upside down. So if I come to my Control T option here again, I can just go to the edge and I can just rotate that. Now if you hold shift while you're rotating it, it'll help you to maintain and keep your lines straight. So shift while you're rotating the edges of that, you can see it just helps to keep everything nice and straight. We just move that over, shift it over a little bit. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Now if I switch on all my layers here again, okay, we can see that we've got this layer here hiding underneath. So we need to paint that out. So if I click on it, I have it highlighted, I create a mask, and we go to our brush option. We've got black selected. We just want to paint out all of that part of it. So we can't see it there in the background. That's absolutely fine. But now I want to start to reveal it underneath the water here. Okay, so to do that, we come back up to our layer here where we've created the mask of the Louvre, and we're going to reduce our opacity down quite significantly of the brush down to about 40%, and we can just start to paint it out. Okay, so just paint it out here. Now you can see I've made a mistake there again. We want to go and select the actual mask. So I was painting out the image. That's no good. There we go. Now we can see we've got another problem appearing here. So now we can see this layer here. So if I switch all of these layers off, this layer is now appearing underneath. And this is no good to us either. Okay, so we need to also paint out that layer. So we create a mask on that. Okay. And we'll just switch this layer back on, and now we just paint that out. So we want to increase the opacity on that because we need to paint it out altogether. So you can see there's quite a lot going on. It is quite complex. It is quite complicated. So now if we switch our layers back on, there we go. We now have our starry sky appearing underneath. So we can just paint that out even more. Go back to our layer that's selected. So you can see here you need to ensure that you're selecting the correct layer every single time. And we just paint that out some more. I might reduce the opacity of this layer here even just to blend it in there. There we go. Okay, so I'm really pleased with now how that's looking. As you can see, there's quite a bit of work involved in that. So again, take it step by step. You can see we've added quite a few layers now to this as well, but it is effective. You know, it does look like a more natural composite. Very often, when you see these types of photographs that are taken in the middle of the city where there's a lot of light pollution, but you get these really nice starry sky behind it, it's usually going to be a composite image. Now, so let's have a quick look at what's coming up in the next lesson, lesson number 6. We're going to have a look at retouching our photographs. A bit of a controversial subject for sure, but it is very important to learn and to understand. Retouching can be done in a really natural way, and it's incredibly important to to be successful. If you want to be successful within Photoshop, to have this ability to retouch. And it's not just about retouching skin or retouching faces and so on. It is also about learning how to remove objects and unnecessary or unwanted things within your photographs. So we'll have a look at how to use the cloning and healing, and we'll finish up by having a look at the brush tool. We've already had an extensive look at the brush tool when it comes to masking. We'll have a look at how we can actually use it to paint in and apply digital makeup. So your lesson challenge for this week, for this lesson even, is to create a composite, and I'd like you to use 3 or more elements. So that can be a background, a sky, and another element included with it as well. So create a composite using 3 or more elements. Post it on facebook.com/Shaw Academy or email us at support@shawacademy.com. Now, before we wrap up this lesson, I want to talk to you about the bigger picture and the places that photography and education have taken me, and with the right help can take you. Education changed my life, and it can change yours as well. And this is my story. I want to give you a little bit of perspective in terms of where I came from, how I got to this stage with my photography, and how education was the key to unlocking my potential. So my story begins back to when I was in and around 15 and I got my first camera, and I was taking photographs using a film camera, Nikon F65, and I found that when I was getting my rolls of film back that I wasn't really getting the results that I was hoping for. So I started doing part-time education, nighttime education actually, while I was still in secondary school. And this is a great way for me to get started in photography, but I had to work part-time on top of school to pay for it as well. So I was paying for it out of my own pocket. Moving on from that though, I had discovered that from doing that nighttime course that photography was really something that I wanted to do, that I wanted it to become my career. So I made the decision that I was going to go and apply to do this in college. But before I could do that, I also needed to build out a portfolio. So in a bit of a catch-22, to get into college, you need to have a photography portfolio. So I enrolled in a 1-year portfolio course. This was great, but I also felt that a year was perhaps a little bit too long for this, but it was still a great experience. But very successful from that, and that did get me into college. I was able to get into my BA in photography. 4 years it took me to study photography in college, and it was a very mixed experience. The whole college life is great. The people I met there, they're friends for life, but I still had to work to pay my way through. This created a lot of pressure with deadlines. It was very, very stressful, particularly in my 4th year. And I also found that my educators, they weren't there when I needed them. They were very difficult to get in contact to. They were very difficult to get responses from. And again, particularly in my final year, I felt a huge amount of pressure while trying to work on top of everything else. But ultimately, it was worthwhile. I left college and I entered the workforce for a number of years, working as a freelance photographer and working in camera shops. But I did find myself stuck in a little bit of a rut. So I decided to go back and get educated even more, because I felt that education was always the way to unlocking doors. Always the way to progress forward and achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I decided that I wanted to teach photography, and the way to do that was to get an MFA, a Master's in Fine Art in Photography. And I went and I studied that. I had to save up a lot of money to do that. Very, very expensive. And again, a very mixed experience during that MFA. A lot of pressure, but also very, very much you were out on your own doing all of this work and had occasional contact with your educators. So it was a lot of money for what I felt was a minimal amount of engagement from my educators. And that was a bit of a frustrating experience, but In the end, I got my MFA, I was qualified to teach, and now I am here teaching you. I joined Shaw Academy. So education unlocked my potential, it opened up doors for me. However, there is a caveat to all of this. As great as education is, it is flawed. And let's be real, education is, first of all, very expensive. I had to save a lot to complete my studies, and many times I did feel like it was not worth it. And unfortunately for many people all over the world, they either simply cannot afford it or they go into crazy debt just to get themselves educated. These kind of stories we're all familiar with people paying off student loans for the majority of their lives. And even when you can afford it, as I mentioned, it is a flawed experience. Lectures don't happen at your convenience. Quite the opposite. In fact, it can be very, very difficult to work around lectures if you are also working, if you're also employed as well. And it's also very, very difficult to get in contact with your educators. It's also a deeply time-consuming experience. Like during my master's, I had to travel to Belfast from Dublin, so that was 2 hours to and from college for only 1 day a week. And to me, that was the craziest part about it. I mean, even if there had been 2 days a week of studying, I could have done that master's in half the amount of time. So having been through the university experience, like many of you, while ultimately worthwhile, it is a deeply flawed and frustrating experience, and something now that at my age, if I decided to do it again, I don't think I would. It was just too expensive and too time consuming. But it doesn't have to be like this. Education doesn't have to be expensive and inflexible. And when I was studying, I really wish something like Shaw Academy had been around. Our mission here in Shaw Academy is to provide to you convenient, flexible, affordable, interactive and internationally recognized education. We are offering you higher education at a lower cost in a way that allows you to learn in your own time, in your own way, without getting in the way of your lives. And again, let's be real here. Let's not sugarcoat this. You've got 2 options available to you right now. You can drop out, or you can continue on and you can achieve your goals. It really is that simple, and you have come so far. If you're making it this far, you are far more likely to go on and to succeed in photography. So my advice to you is to not drop out. Don't drop out. You want to achieve your goals. It really is that simple. Life is full of distractions. We have lots of excuses, lots of reasons to give in. It's a lot easier to be negative than it is to be positive. But don't give in. Simply stick with it. Stick with your goals and you will see changes. We say it at the start and the end of every lesson, not to drop out. And it is just a case of showing up to every lesson to see results. So my advice to you is not to drop out. Reach your potential with us. Most students will take out a 6 or 12 month membership to give themselves enough time to achieve your goals. And right now we are offering a huge discount on our memberships. So you can get 50% off for a limited time. You can get 12 months education for the price of 6, or you can get 6 months education for the price of 3, and so on. And this means that you can complete this course comfortably and affordably, but you can go on and complete many other courses in the faculty and across the entire range of courses available in Shaw Academy as well. But of course, you also have the 1 month plan if that's easiest for you from an upfront cost perspective. But if you can afford it, I do recommend 12-month option, and it is the best value for money. But the key is not to drop out, to achieve your goals with us. This is a limited offer, so do be aware that there is a time limit on this, so don't be late in getting yourself upgraded. It couldn't be easier. When you go into your student login area or your members area in shawacademy.com, you're going to see a pop-up come up, and I'm sure you've seen it there already, and all you have to do is to click the option that best suits you. So you have a lot of choice there. And if you have any questions about any of that at all, do remember to reach out to us at support@shawacademy.com. So we've run well over time, so we'll finish out the lesson. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you all back soon, very, very soon, for lesson number 6. Until then, bye-bye.